Tenerife, 1797. The defeat of Nelson. At the end of the 18th century, the control of the seas was one of the keys to world power. Great Britain was fighting for dominance with the combined forces of France and Spain, who were allies at that time, in a bloody confrontation for any ocean, any bay, or any port. In February 1797, the defeat of the Spanish squadron at Cape St. Vincent off the coast of Portugal, inflicted by the English fleet, was the beginning of a period of significant British dominance, which would be noticeable in an increase in hostile activity on the part of the victors. A few months later, Horatio Nelson, an emerging figure in the military panorama of the time, was made responsible for the naval blockade of Cadiz, one of the ports most used for trade between Spain and the American colonies, and a nerve center of both its economy and its defense. During this blockade, the idea was born of including the island of Tenerife on the map of desired territories, with the project of rocking the political scene of the time developing into a sudden attack which would be not only a blow to the Spanish treasury, but would also in all probability lead to an end to the conflict between the two powers. Santa Cruz short voyage. 20th of July, on the high seas. The British squadron was at a distance of 13 leagues from Tenerife, and Nelson summoned his officers to the Theseus and ordered Commander Troubridge to take 1,000 men to disembark to the north of the town. Nelson knew, according to the plans he had of the Bay of Santa Cruz, where the fortress of Paso Alto was located, with 22 cannon, which made it a very important defensive position. Nelson to Troubridge. From the moment that you are on land, I recommend to you that you should attack the fortress, and proceed to attack the town and the battery at the pier head. Or you should send my letter, which contains our conditions of surrender. As I have the most steadfast trust in your ability, it only remains for me to wish you success with all my heart. Horatio Nelson. The letter, which was initially addressed to General Gutierrez, officially warned him to surrender his troops and forts, handing over the frigate La Princesa, its cargo, and the goods that had been disembarked in Santa Cruz. Nelson. Sir, I assure you of a surrender in the most honourable and liberal terms. But if you reject my conditions, all the horrors of war which will fall upon the inhabitants of Tenerife will be imputed by the world to yourself and yourself alone, since I shall destroy Santa Cruz and the other towns on the island by means of a bombardment. Santa Cruz, 24th of July, 8 o'clock in the evening. Dear Sir, tonight I, humble as I am, will take command of all the forces that are devoted to the disembarkation under the batteries of the town. And tomorrow my head will be crowned with the laurels of victory or the cypresses of death. At 11 o'clock at night, 960 men were embarked onto the launches of the squadron and onto the cutter Fox. The captains Troubridge, Hood, Thompson, Miller, Waller, Fremantle and Bowen accompanied Nelson in the attack. At around 2 o'clock in the morning they had reached half a cannon shot from the wharf without having been observed. Minutes later, voices were heard from the frigate La Princesa. The wharf! Launches to the wharf! The advantage of surprise was lost, and the castles commenced violent cannon fire. The disembarkation had begun. Due to the bad weather and the harassment of the artillery, only 5 launches managed to reach the wharf, with the remainder heading southwards. At the same time, the cutter Fox was hit and sunk, with over 90 men being drowned, together with the commander, John Gibson. Meanwhile, the British continued their disembarkation, despite the intense gunfire. managing to put the battery on the quay out of use and attempting to get closer to the castle of San Cristobal. In the gunfire, a bullet hit Captain Bowen, who died there and then. Despite all this, the British continued to disembark, encouraged by their Commander-in-Chief, Rear Admiral Nelson, who, at the moment at which he was about to set foot on land and draw his sword, was hit by shrapnel in his right arm. He was taken to the Theseus, and his arm was amputated. The remainder of the launches, driven by the currents to the south of Santa Cruz, divided into two groups. The first, under Commander Troubridge, disembarked at the beach of La Caleta, heading for the main square. But they were held back by the fire from the castle of San Cristobal, and withdrew by the streets of La Caleta, Sol, and Tiendas to the upper part of the square, to there await their planned meeting with Nelson, which never happened. Troubridge decided to try his luck by sending a messenger demanding the surrender of General Gutierrez, who replied, "I still have gunpowder, bullets, and men." The other group of launchers, under the command of Captains Hood and Miller, managed to disembark on the beach of Las Carnicerias at the mouth of the Santos Ravine. And after being held up by the infantry battalion of the Canary Islands, they withdrew up Calle La Noria to the surroundings of the monastery of Santo Domingo. Troubridge and his men came together with them after withdrawing up the street called Las Tiendas. They were about 600 men who were immediately surrounded by the island troops, and a tough confrontation continued through the night. The British troops were trusting in relief from the storm, but the launchers that were sent were kept away by the fire from the island. The enemy launchers drawn up on the beach were destroyed by the soldiers, women, and children of Santa Cruz. In view of this situation, the British could do little more, and Troubridge sent Captain Hood to agree their surrender with General Gutierrez, which was accepted in the following terms. The troops of His Britannic Majesty will be embarked with all their arms, in consideration whereof the ships of the British squadron undertake for their part not to disturb in any way the town of Santa Cruz, nor any other of the Canary Islands. Given under my hand and on my word of honor, Samuel Hood. Ratified by Thomas Troubridge, Commander of the British troops. The people of Tenerife towards the defeated soldiers were very generous. The wounded were attended to in the hospitals, and they were given all necessary provisions. Gutierrez himself invited the English officers to eat. On the following day, Nelson, surprised, sent a letter to General Gutierrez. On board the Theseus, off Tenerife, the 26th of July. I cannot leave this island without giving Your Excellency the most sincere thanks for your fine attention to myself, for the humanity that you have shown to our wounded who were in your power, and for the generosity that you showed to all those who disembarked. I beg Your Excellency to do me the honor of accepting a barrel of English beer and a cheese. Your obedient and humble servant, Horatio Nelson. To which Gutierrez replied, Dear Sir, I consider that the man who only fulfills what humanity dictates to him deserves no laurels. And this is what I have done for the wounded, and for those who disembarked here, whom I must consider my brothers from the instant the combat is concluded. I hope that your lordship will accept a couple of flagons of wine, which I believe are not of the worst that this land produces. I beg that God will conserve your life for many long and happy years. On the 28th of July 1797, the English squadron set sail for Cadiz, bearing the report in which the Minister of War was informed of the victory over the British. In 1803, King Carlos IV gave the town the title of Very Loyal, Noble and Unvanquished Town, Port and Fortifications of Santa Cruz de Santiago de Tenerife, adding the third lion's head to the coat of arms, which records the 3 victories over the British: Blake in 1657, Jennings in 1706, and Nelson in 1797. Nowadays, the memory of the attack remains unchanged in the culture of this cosmopolitan city, through the multitude of objects such as the cannon known as El Tigre, which are conserved with respect and affection in the museum, which bear witness to the event. We commemorate the spirit time of confrontation, generosity, and honor. The military action of the 25th of July was fought by people who lived, fought, and gave their lives for their respective countries over 200 years ago. On the British side, the losses were 146 dead and 105 wounded. For the islanders, 24 dead and 38 wounded, including both military